This is America, and this is one small part of the world's largest naval base here in Norfolk, Virginia. Ships from here are out on operational duty in the Middle East. And from Jordan to Iran, from the Red Sea to the Strait of Hormuz, we are seeing what seems to be a real rise in tensions at the moment. As diplomacy stalls, I'll be asking whether or not we're starting to see a wider war and what the impacts of that will be. First, though, let's go to our Washington, D.C. studio and Alex Marquardt.
Thank you, Richard. For a moment there, it looked like the fighting between the U.S. and Iran might be slowing down, even ending. But that hope appears to be fading fast. The U.S. is now targeting Iranian industrial hubs, while Iran is expanding where it is targeting U.S. forces. At the center of this crisis are two of the world's most important maritime choke points, the Strait of Hormuz and Bab al-Mandeb, where this military confrontation is rapidly becoming economic warfare. The question now is no longer whether this conflict continues, but whether it is expanding into a wider regional war that becomes far harder to contain. The U.S. is well positioned with military installations all across the Middle East. It's from some of these bases that they've launched their strikes on Iran. But Iran has retaliated. U.S. military facilities in Bahrain, Jordan, Iraq, and Kuwait have all reportedly been targeted. Iran has also hit oil facilities in Saudi Arabia, resulting in a joint U.S.-Saudi series of attacks on Iranian-backed militias in Iraq. And a drone strike hit a U.S.-owned natural gas storage ship at an Egyptian port as well. Let's get back to Richard Gaisford in Norfolk, Virginia. He has more details on how this conflict is potentially growing.
With the ceasefire broken, American forces in the Middle East are busy with daily missions over Iran. Last month, the president proclaimed Iran's military had been totally destroyed. Today, he's wanting to hit them harder.
We'll be hitting them very hard. And, at some point, they're going to say, we just can't take it anymore.
Mr. President.
In the past weeks, Iran's attacks have increased, hitting U.S. bases in Jordan and Iraq with ballistic missiles. Defending against them is coming at a cost. The defense secretary's asked for more cash from Congress, with some questioning his leadership.
Mr. Secretary, you stated 4 months ago that Iran's military had been rendered, quote, combat ineffective for years to come.
Not
you
even
stated
close.
we
It doesn't
had,
mean
quote,
it doesn't have capabilities.
Mr. Secretary, you stated we had, quote, achieved every single objective. Was that an accurate statement 4 months ago?
The main objective of this was to ensure that Iran never gets a nuclear weapon. Their main sites were obliterated. We're watching over them, and we're holding that issue.
Central Command oversees more than 4 million square miles.
U.S. Central Command has been promoting its military might on social media, but each day of the war sees its inventory depleted. The Center for Strategic and International Studies estimates the U.S. has used between 1/3 and 1/2 of its reserves of 7 key munitions. That includes 65% of its Patriot air defense missiles, and it's fired 1,000 Tomahawk missiles since the war started. That's 1/3 of the total stock. It's not just the cost of the missiles that's causing concern. It's reported regional allies like Saudi Arabia fear an escalation of the conflict could lead to serious consequences, including attacks on Arab capitals, desalination plants, and commercial centers. With 2 ships hit in Egypt on Wednesday in a drone attack, there's concern about a wider war affecting shipping and trade routes away from the Hormuz Strait, which continues to be the focus of conflict, restricting the flow of oil and gas and keeping prices high around the globe. The U.S. continues to move resources in and out of the Middle East. The world's largest warship returned to Norfolk, Virginia in May after an 11-month mission that included operational duties in the area. 50,000 American servicemen and women remain in the region, a number that could quickly grow if Donald Trump decides to use more force against Iran.
And Richard joins us now from Norfolk, Virginia, which is home to the largest concentration of U.S. naval forces. So, Richard, in this conflict that is so focused on control of waterways, how prominent is the U.S. Navy's role?
It's absolutely pivotal. They have 2 aircraft carrier strike groups in the Middle East, and they're being used to launch daily missions and patrols. But they also have ships like this one, USS Bataan, which is an amphibious assault vessel. And that will allow them to transition from a war based at sea to one based on land. And a land invasion is still very much a possibility, Alex. This place, as you say, the largest naval base in the world, and it's not just the ships they have here in Norfolk. There's a big Oceana naval air station as well. They have large depots for munitions and missiles that are kept here, as well as the Navy SEALs and other key departments that are also based in this area. So it's very busy. Pretty much everyone you meet in and around Norfolk either has a link to this place, or they have a view on the war and how it's progressing and the direction it should be taking.
In short, I feel that it should have been a very short engagement, if any at all. I think American interests should be put first. And maybe if we're going to be over there, maybe American interests are misaligned.
They need to do what needs to be done. They need to finish the job. Enough. Needs to end.
And does that mean going harder on Iran right now, do you think?
I trust President Trump to do whatever he feels needs to be done. It's gone on long enough. Too many presidents have walked this path and failed. Enough is enough. It needs to end.
I want the Iranians, the oppressed people, to live better, to have more freedom. But I don't know if this war will bring that, will make that happen. But I want our military men and women to not be a part of all of this. I feel like this war was started without Congress blessings, and that shouldn't be how we start wars in this country.
I think they need to hammer them and get it done. That's all I have to say.
Really, what you
Yeah.
And do you think that would actually have the desired effect?
I do. It's a regime that needs to be gone. And they don't need to pussyfoot around with it. They just need to take care of it.
Joining me now to further discuss this dangerous moment is Charles Kupchan, a former National Security Council official under President Barack Obama, and Kenneth Katzman. He is the former senior analyst on Iran at the U.S. Congressional Research Service. Charles, Kenneth, thank you both for joining me at this really pivotal moment in this conflict. How dangerous, Kenneth, is this new phase of escalation that we've seen in recent days?
Well, thank you for having me again. The entire situation is dangerous. Basically, the U.S. is at a strategic dead end. And in my view, it either has to escalate or basically acknowledge that Iran is going to claim control and probably exercise control of the Strait of Hormuz. And so Mr. Trump, in my view, either has a choice whether to escalate, probably with ground troops, as unfortunate as that choice might be, or just simply acknowledge that he cannot achieve his objectives and come home.
Back down and hand over control of the Strait to Iran.
Those are the two choices as I see it. That's correct.
Charles, how do you see it?
You know, I think that we are in a escalatory phase, but it's limited escalation. I think that neither the Iranians nor the Americans really want to go to the mat and just let everything go. And I think that that's probably a good thing because it's already a region-wide war, but it could turn into a region-wide explosion. And right now, I think there's a certain amount of cat and mouse, tit for tat, where the United States is trying to increase the heat. The Iranians are responding in kind. They're looking for an off-ramp, a breakthrough at the negotiating table, but neither side really seems to be willing to make a compromise, to back down. So I think we're in a bit of a stalemate right now. I'm not sure I would agree with Kenneth that the only option other than full-scale war is letting Iran have the Strait of Hormuz. I hope that there is some kind of compromise that can be hammered out, a regional consortium, some kind of plan that gives Iran more control over the Strait, but still leaves it an international waterway.
How much do you believe, Kenneth, Iran is directing its proxies to step things up?
Oh, absolutely. This is how Iran always planned to exercise
direct orders
power.
to those proxies?
I believe in the case of the Houthis, they asked the Houthis specifically to close the al-Mandeb, and the Houthis have started to act to do that. They directed their militia allies in Iraq to attack Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and others, and that's exactly what they're doing. So they are using these allies. I don't necessarily call them proxies because they have their own leaderships and their own ideology too, but they are using their allies to ratchet up the pressure and show that they can exert pressure all over the region.
Have you been surprised, Charles, at seeing some of the U.S.'s Arab allies, the Saudis, the Bahrainis, the Kuwaitis, getting involved in some of these strikes?
I'm not surprised. In some ways, I find it more surprising that it took this long, in the sense that Iran retaliated from the get-go against a wide range of Gulf partners of the United States. And they weren't just hitting U.S. bases. They were hitting hotels. They were hitting energy installations. They were hitting civilian targets.
And for the most part, those allies were holding back despite
completely
that.
Holding back. I mean, the strikes that the Saudis got involved in Jordan, or excuse me, in Iraq, they're the first time that you've really seen one of these countries that have been the target of Iranian attacks push back. I still don't think that we are at the point where you're going to see a region-wide conflagration with everybody getting in. But even if that's the case, even if both sides are being deliberate, wars have a tendency to spin out of control. And I think the Iranians are a little bit too cocky. They may overstep the bounds. I think that Trump is tempted to go for broke and start hitting a wide range of civilian targets. If that starts, we just don't know where it goes.
President Trump was asked about the prospect of further negotiations, and he said this earlier today at a cabinet meeting at Camp David. Take a listen.
Do you believe that you can reach a deal with Iran, given that you talked about how disloyal they are?
I'm losing faith in them because they do lie and they do misrepresent. Well, the other day, the 5 missiles were shot. We knocked them down, but we were in the midst of a negotiation. I mean, I'm waiting for Steve to call me. How's the negotiation going? And instead, I got a call from Pete that they just shot 5 missiles at one of our bases in Jordan.
Pete being Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense. So Trump saying there that he's losing faith in these talks. Kenneth, do you expect this escalation to last for a while, or do you think we can see these officials back at the table soon?
Well, even if it's back at the table, I mean, we've been back at we were back in the table in early July. The Omanis were talking with the Iranians on a compromise on the Strait, and then Iran shot 3 ships. Then the Omanis were back at it last week, again talking about a compromise, and Iran shot the 5 missiles at Jordan. So each time Mr. Trump tries, in my view, in good faith, to bring this to a conclusion, and he offered a lot of compromises in the Memorandum of Understanding, the Iranian hardliners, who are dominant in the regime, continue to press for full control of the Strait, and they do not seem to want to de-escalate. So I'm not optimistic that there's going to be any solution to this.
The Memorandum of Understanding was, of course, that multi-point plan that brought about a ceasefire a couple of weeks ago, and then it fell apart. Charles, do you think that MOU can be resurrected in any way?
Not that same MOU, and that's probably a good thing, because it was more of a memorandum of misunderstanding, where different parties read the various provisions differently.
It was not very specific.
It was not very specific, and I think that's in partly because they couldn't find common ground, so they kicked the can down the road. I do think that the possibility remains for a deal. It's probably not going to be a deal that Trump is going to like, and that's simply because the Iranians have discovered newfound leverage, and that is they can shut the Strait of Hormuz at will. Trump is heading into midterms. The price of gasoline is going back up. I think he wants and needs a deal for his political survival, his political future. That having been said, Iran risks overreaching. I think shooting at those boats that were hugging the coast of Oman, launching 5 missiles in a surprise attack, that suggests that the hardliners are really running risks here. And so I hope that cooler heads prevail and they go back to the negotiating table and try to find a deal.
And it is, of course, not just the Strait of Hormuz. Kenneth, you mentioned that other critical waterway. I want to take a closer look at that because attention is turning to what is known as the al-Mandeb Strait. Al Jazeera's Eva McKend explains its importance and how it could become the next flashpoint.
By now, you're familiar with the Strait of Hormuz. But there is one narrow waterway off the coast of Yemen, which is one of the world's most important economic choke points. What happens here can affect the price of everything from groceries to gasoline. Bab al-Mandeb is between Yemen in the Arabian Peninsula and Djibouti and Eritrea in East Africa. It's the southern entrance to the Red Sea, connecting it to the Indian Ocean. Ships traveling between Europe and Asia through the Suez Canal generally pass through here. Yemen's Iran-backed Houthi movement has launched attacks threatening commercial shipping, raising the risk of a worsening oil supply disruption and pushing the global price of crude oil higher. The group is also considering charging commercial vessels. It's only about 20 miles wide, or about 32 kilometers at its narrowest point. Around 10 to 12% of global maritime trade passes through the Bab al-Mandeb Strait, including millions of barrels of oil every day. Saudi Arabia is forming a military coalition to protect shipping in the Red Sea, as attacks by Houthis imperil a crucial route for Saudi oil exports and further threaten the global economy. Now, 14 countries affirm their support for this coalition, including Turkey, Egypt, and Pakistan. If shipping companies decide it's too dangerous to sail here, vessels could be forced to take a much longer trip around the southern tip of Africa, adding weeks to travel and upping transport costs. And here is why all of this matters. Iran and its regional allies don't necessarily have to defeat the United States militarily to continue ramping up the pressure. By threatening some of the world's busiest shipping lanes, they can raise economic costs all over the globe. That's why this narrow strip of water should be one of the most closely watched places in the world.
So when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz, Kenneth, the Iranians have said that it will never return to its pre-war situation. Pick up on some of what Charles was just saying. Where do you see a middle ground where the U.S. and Iran can land, and which the Gulf allies could stomach as well?
I don't see a middle ground, I'm sorry. That statement that they keep making, that's not the only statement to that effect that they've made, does not leave much room for a middle ground. The Omanis are their closest Gulf quasi-ally, and that's not really an ally, but it's not an enemy. And the Omanis have been at it and at it and at it, negotiating. They've even attacked Oman. Can you believe that? So it's going to be tough. It's going to be very, very tough to get a deal that's acceptable to Mr. Trump. We can discuss, maybe he blundered getting into this. That's a widespread view. We are where we are. I don't see him getting out of it that easily with an easy compromise. There's not an easy compromise to be found here.
We are now in the 6th month of this war. There's a lot of discussion, a lot of reporting about stocks of some pretty key weaponry running low, especially when it comes to missile interceptors. How much do you think, Charles, that has played into Trump's calculations here?
I think it matters. There's no question that this war, from Donald Trump's perspective, has gone sideways. I think it's pretty clear that this was a war that was originally intended at regime change. It didn't work. It's turned into a long war. And if you just look at how many Patriot missiles and Tomahawks and precision-guided missiles have been expended, including those for the Gulf allies, and then you add those that have been sent to Ukraine, there can't be a lot left. And a Patriot missile, for example, costs a lot of money, and it takes a long time to produce. It's not as if you can pick up the phone and say, hey, can you send me another 1,000? So there's no question that the Pentagon is worried about stockpiles. It's weighing on Donald Trump. It's one of the reasons that I think in the end of the day, the United States is going to be looking keenly for some kind of diplomatic solution.
And on the flip side, despite these grand claims of the decimation of the Iranian military, they are showing some pretty significant fight. Kenneth, give us a reality check, if you will, as to the strength of the Iranian military today.
Well, it's an unconventional military. Their conventional military is indeed very, very badly degraded. Combat aircraft, they don't really have that many tanks, ships, but they have this unconventional capability, which is missiles and drones. But the thing is that is getting played out. I mean, they're sort of a one-dimensional threat. You know, missiles and drones is sort of all they have in their playbook. So that could run out on Tehran, you know, if Mr. Trump decides to apply pressure. The problem is the pressure he's applying, the regime can stand up to it. They don't care. They don't care if Iran turns into looking like Gaza. They don't care if the population starves, as long as they can say that they have upheld their resistance ideology. They are all about resistance ideology, and it's not going to be bombed out of them. They're not going to give up on that.
Is there any indication, Charles, that the Iranians are really stepping up in terms of asymmetric warfare? There's been some reporting about a cyber attack in Minnesota against water facilities. Trump today said it was not the Iranians. But that is out there. Do you get the sense that they are stepping things up in different ways?
Surprisingly, no. I would have expected by now attacks on U.S. sites or Ukrainian sites or Israeli sites somewhere out of the region. I would have expected more indications of cyber attacks. Iran has not hit Israel, even though the war has started back up. So that suggests to me a certain level of strategic restraint. They're being somewhat careful. And I agree with Kenneth that this is a regime that doesn't really care what the state of life is for the Iranian people. But at some point, if Trump goes ahead and he hits power plants, and he hits desalination plants, and he hits bridges and tunnels, the military itself begins to lose the capability to fight, to launch drones, to launch ballistic missiles. So I do think that even though they are hardliners, there is a point at which they feel that they can't keep going. And that may be the moment when you say, OK, let's go to the negotiating table.
I do want to ask you about something you just mentioned a moment ago, the politics, the domestic politics in this country. How cognizant do you think the Iranians are of our political calendar?
Extremely cognizant. They watch what goes on here. The United States, like it or not, is extraordinarily transparent. You can see what's going on in Congress. You can see what the American public is saying about the war in Iran. I think that they know, the Iranians know, this is not a popular war. They know that Trump has his back up against the wall, and that's one of the reasons that they are pushing ahead. But again, they have to be careful. They have to be careful not to overreach. Otherwise, as Trump has said, he could well really hit them hard.
One of the most striking things for me in this memorandum of understanding was that it really kicked the can down the road on the nuclear issue. It was basically, we'll get to those discussions at some point. We are so far away from a real ceasefire here or any kind of agreement on the Strait and various other issues. Kenneth, do you think that this administration, with the more than 2 years it has left, will get to any kind of nuclear agreement with Iran?
Well, I think it's going to be difficult, and this is why Mr. Trump is so frustrated, because the Iranians insisted we will defer the nuclear issue until there's a ceasefire. Mr. Trump gave them that. They insisted on a ceasefire in Lebanon and the rest of the region. He gave them that. In his view, he gave them everything they wanted. And in his view, the one thing he had to have was an open Strait of Hormuz. And they didn't give him that. This is why he is escalating. This is why I think he is going to escalate further. And I think we have some agreement, because I think the type of strikes that were discussed of civilian infrastructure, if he absolutely will not use ground troops, which he appears he will not, that could be a roadmap to bringing Iran to the table seriously and getting this over with, possibly.
I was struck, Charles, by something that you wrote about this war, but this was back in March, in the early days. You wrote, quote, "The way this war ends will ultimately determine whether Trump's decision to attack Iran goes down in history as a rash act of folly or a courageous strategic success." The war, of course, is not over, but which is it looking more likely?
I think we can safely say folly, in the sense that even if you get a deal, even if the Strait of Hormuz gets opened, this is a war that didn't work. This is a war that has been enormously costly. I would go so far to say I'm not sure that Trump can recover from this politically, because not only is it unpopular across the political spectrum, it is unpopular among Trump's own MAGA base. In fact, some members of the Republican Party have left the party because Trump said no more wars. And what did he do? He launched yet another failed war of choice in the Middle East.
When you look at the regime today, there's a new supreme leader, the son, who we have not yet seen. The IRGC seems firmly in charge, at least, of the negotiations. Do you think, Kenneth, that Trump has weakened or strengthened the Iranian regime?
There is no supreme leader. There's no supreme leader. He was appointed March 8th.
In name only.
As I said on this network, the sister network, Al Jazeera Arabic, this week, he's the Wizard of Oz on a screen with somebody pulling dials. There is no. This is why the Iranians can't bring themselves to resolve the issue, because there's no arbiter. There's no one who can resolve the basic dispute. Do we reach a deal with Mr. Trump, or do we keep fighting and embarrass Mr. Trump? They can't resolve it because there is no supreme leader like Ayatollah Khomeini, who formed the regime, Ayatollah Khamenei, who was killed the first day. They cannot bring themselves to resolve this basic contradiction in their position.
Only 10 seconds, Charles. Has he strengthened the regime or weakened them?
Strengthened. And that's one of the reasons that he's having such a hard time bringing this conflict to an end.
All right. Charles Kupchan and Kenneth Katzman, thank you both very much for joining me today. Very important moment. Appreciate it. And that's all from myself and the team here in Washington. I want to hand it back to Richard Gaisford in Norfolk, Virginia, and Al Jazeera's global headquarters in Doha.
Well, that's it for this edition of This is America. We'll be back on Monday at 18:30 GMT. That's 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time here in the United States. For now, though, from Norfolk, Virginia, it's goodbye.